Whenever I give a concert to younger students, they always ask, "Wally, what's that in your bell?" To which I always reply, "It's Dr. Wallace. How about some respect, you little sh**?" Hi, and welcome to the Saxophone Academy channel. I'm Dr. Wally Wallace, and today we're talking about the Saxophone Mute and a review of the Peak Performance Woodwind bell ring, which does the same thing as a mute, maybe better, and has a more appropriate name. Now, much like the Death Star, the modern saxophone has a design flaw that presents a challenge to the modern saxophone player. Namely, the lowest notes on the saxophone, low B flat and B, are very sharp. Now, I once went to a clinic with Kurt Alterac of Music Medic, and he explained the acoustics of the saxophone and why some notes are sharp and flat, being well-vented and under-vented. I zoned out during a lot of it because it was right before lunch, but what I remember is the bell is a very big vent, and thus making the lowest notes that use the bell very sharp. So like a lot of saxophonists, I learned about a solution from Larry Teal's The Art of Saxophone Playing. Now, Larry Teal describes how to make a donut mute out of a curtain ring and ribbon, and that does lower the lowest notes of the bell. Now, there's a problem. Curtain rings may not be the right size for your saxophone. When I first tried to do it, I went to the arts and crafts store, bought a curtain ring, wrapped it lovingly in velvet ribbon, dropped it on my bell, and it plunked straight down to the bottom. It didn't fit. Some modern saxophonists, myself included, have started making them out of a flexible pipe cleaner wrapped in ribbon. It does the same thing, but it fits in more size bells. Now, there's a problem with calling the mute a mute. When we think of the word mute, we think of something being quiet or reduced in volume, like a mute on a TV, or Marcel Marceau, who was a mute, or a mime. Doesn't matter. Anyway, we think of mute as making something more quiet. Now, in the brass world, that is a more appropriate name, because the mute not only changes the color and timbre of the sound, it drastically can reduce the volume as well. On the saxophone, unless you're playing the lowest notes on the saxophone, the mute has very little change to the volume, which doesn't make it a great descriptor. And not everyone likes the idea of using a mute anyway. There are some aficionados of vintage horn and equipment, the Rasher school of playing, that prefer open chamber mouthpieces and older horns with a parabolic shaped bore, and they claim they don't need it to lower the lowest notes on the instrument. That may be true, but on the modern saxophone, the low notes are very sharp. And there are some players who say, yes, it's sharp, but I don't need a mute. I can lower it with my embouchure. That's true. I can lower those notes with my embouchure. I choose not to. I can walk across the room and change the TV volume by pressing buttons up or down, or use a remote. It's more convenient. I have no problem with using it. They're also not terribly popular in the jazz world. I remember going to a big band rehearsal in Tucson, and the tenor player made fun of me for using it. But he later got fired and lost his house in foreclosure. So who's laughing now, Paul? Not him. Probably not Paul. But I think it's useful for even jazz players to have. You never know when you're going to do a pops concert with a local symphony. You might have to play those low notes in tune with a bassoon or some other instrument. So you can certainly make your own out of pipe cleaner or Chanel stems and a bit of ribbon. But if you don't like arts and crafts or you want something a bit better, Peak Performance Woodwinds makes a bell ring, which serves the same purpose, but a little bit better. One of the first things you'll notice about this is they're not covered in ribbon, they're covered in plastic. And that's good for a couple reasons. Number one, it won't suck up moisture and bacteria. And number two, it fits very nicely in the bell without slipping. Now, you can get these for all size saxophones, and they come in a variety of colors, solid, striped, sparkly ones. Let's do a little fashion show. Now, when I first opened the box, I noticed each of the mutes had a strange symbol on it. Now, obviously, these symbols must be some kind of secret code, so I started unlocking the secret code, and I knew it was going to lead me to some kind of cool national treasure. But then I found the sizing chart. It's actually a sizing chart, because they come in also a large variety of thickness and diameter to fit many different kinds of saxophones and lower and darken the tone to different degrees. So do they work? Well, let's do a playing test and find out. And it should be noted, I'm not trying to adjust the intonation of the low B flat, I'm trying to let it just sit where it lies. and they brought it pretty darn close to being in tune. So unless you just really enjoy arts and crafts, I think they're a better option. They lower the pitch just like a traditional mute, but they also stay in place, so they're not going to slip and alter the intonation while you're playing, and that's a good thing. They're also fairly cheap. The soprano is just $12, the alto $15, and the tenor saxophone is just $18. Now, to figure out what size you want, I would recommend ordering a couple. They've got a great return policy, so you can order a couple, pick the one you want, and ship back the others for just $1 or $2 in shipping fees. No big deal. Start with the O or open model and then try the 1 and 2. I bet one of those will most likely work in your horn. And perhaps best of all, they're less conspicuous than the donut-style mute, so maybe no one will see it, and students will quit asking. If you found this useful, we would certainly appreciate a thumbs up, and please do subscribe. We have some very cool masterclass topics coming up. Until then, happy practicing, and we'll see you next week.